It's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Ahoyerno, who says, will there be another amendment to the American Constitution in our lifetime? Amendment 27 was accepted in 1992, but proposed in 1789. The last amendment to be ratified in less than a century was the 26th in 1971. Isn't it about time? Is it even possible? Yeah, it is about time. And as to whether it's possible or not, I don't know. I mean, our political climate today is so partisan and so bitterly divided. It would be really difficult to ratify an amendment to the Constitution. You'd not only have to pass it through Congress, but also through enough state legislatures to ratify it. So I don't know. I don't know of any on the horizon. Like, I don't think there's any prospect right now. There's not a specific piece of legislation that is sort of making the rounds that people are saying, oh, this will be the next amendment. So I don't know. I have some ideas that I think I've talked about in answers to questions on previous episodes in this series of amendments that I think would be a good idea, like a beefed up, all-inclusive equal rights amendment that establishes firmly in writing in the Constitution that there are protections against discrimination on the basis of race, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, disability, national origin, like all the things that have basically been settled in court cases but are still disputed and people still sort of rise up against. To have an equal rights amendment that just lays it all out. You can't discriminate against women, you can't discriminate against black folks or people of color in general, you can't discriminate against people because of their religion or because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity or whatever. That would be one. An amendment to impose campaign finance reform would be another one. I would love to see all federal elections be publicly funded. I think that would be great. I think an amendment might be necessary to do that. But yeah, there are a lot of hypothetical amendments to the Constitution that would be good, and it's been, what's it been now, 25 years almost since the last one was ratified. So yeah, it's about time. But will it happen anytime soon? I don't know. Within our lifetime, yeah, probably. But how long? Who knows? Nikki Nachia, hey Steve, on cultural appropriation, isn't it near impossible to identify when something is being taken or when something is appreciated? I'm an American, I'm surrounded by the melting pot culture of America. It was never a problem to share in cultural experience. Should we really start drawing lines in the sand when we just started to get diversity? I think we need to draw a distinction between the melting pot or diversity, which I would call incredibly good things and necessary things, and cultural appropriation. I don't think cultural appropriation and the melting pot are the same thing. Cultural appropriation, as I said last week, is when an empowered culture, a dominant culture, takes from a subordinate culture. Those with the power taking what they want from those who, relatively speaking, don't have the power. That's cultural appropriation. And being careful about that and objecting to that and asking that that be avoided is not anti-melting pot or anti-diversity. Now, as to should we really start drawing lines, I think those lines should be drawn by marginalized people who feel that their culture is being appropriated. I don't think it's for me or for people like me to draw the line. So if there are lines to be drawn, and if there is a definition of, okay, this is cultural appropriation and this isn't to be made, I think that that definition has to be made and discussed among marginalized people who are actually being appropriated from. It's not for me to say. Yarrow Kassir, Steve, how do you feel about the persecution of atheists in this country? Do you think we're still the most distrusted group in this country, or have the Muslims surpassed us as most distrusted? Whether it's an issue of trust or not, atheists may be the most distrusted demographic, but in terms of who gets the worst treatment, who is the most persecuted in the United States, I think it would have to be Muslims. For the simple reason that most atheists are able to go through life without projecting to the rest of the world that we are atheists. There is no culturally identifiable trait of an atheist that you can see just by looking at someone, unless they're wearing like an atheist t-shirt or something. that you can tell, oh, that's an atheist, and now I will treat them accordingly. Whereas if you are a Muslim and you choose to dress yourself or present your appearance in a traditionally Muslim style or in a way that people perceive as Muslim, then you are subjected to all of that anti-Muslim bigotry that people throw on you, and there's not really anything you can do about it. So I think Muslims are a lot more persecuted in the United States than atheists are. But I do think that there is still very much a stigma on atheism, and I do think there are atheists who suffer because they are atheists. There are atheists who are kicked out of their houses, who are alienated from their families, who face added tension and social pressure and things like that from their friends and their family because they are known to be atheists. So atheists are definitely stigmatized and are marginalized to a degree in the United States, and that is absolutely unacceptable and a real shame, and something that the atheist movement and the free thought movement in general is trying to do something about, to counteract. But if you're going to compare the persecution of atheists in the United States to the persecution of Muslims, I don't know. I really don't think it's that much of a comparison. I would say I would much rather be an atheist in the United States than be a Muslim. I think I've got it a lot easier. Hexerci. Hey Steve, here's a question for you. We no longer have books, we read Kindles, we no longer watch TV, we have YouTube and Netflix. What's the future going to be like when we push technology to its limits, like smartphones, VR, and whatnot? Will there still be reasons to leave the house? There was a book that came out a couple years ago that asked the question, will artificial intelligence be humanity's last invention? And I've often thought, if we ever really nail virtual reality, that might be our last invention. Because, I've, like, you watch Star Trek The Next Generation and you watch the holodeck, like, you can go into this room and create any world you want. And, the thought occurs to me, like, why would you ever leave? Like, they have food replicators that can, create food, edible, nourishing food out of thin air, essentially. They have computerized simulations that they can enter that are just as real as reality, that are real to the touch and the smell and the look and everything. Why not just go into the holodeck with a replicator and have a nice life? Why would you ever leave? That would have to be an incredibly tempting possibility for many people. So I don't know. I think in the future, when we do have, immersive virtual reality, maybe not to the extent of the holodeck, but something akin to that, where you can sort of get lost in an artificial world. I think maybe going outside and interacting with real people in a real environment will become maybe a little bit like we view going to the movies now. When you go to the movies to see a recently released film, that's like a special thing. Because there are lots of easier ways to do it. There are lots of cheaper ways to do it. You can go to the theater and see a movie, or you can wait 3 or 4 months and watch it in your living room, or watch it on your computer, or watch it on your phone. And you don't have the hassle of waiting in line and having to get tickets and having to go to a concession stand. It's so much easier, but we still go to the movies because there's something special about it. It's an outing, and it's fun, and it's interesting, and it's exciting. And maybe in the future, when virtual reality is a part of our lives, maybe going outside and interacting with the real world and interacting with nature or actual people face to face, maybe it will be kind of like going to the movies. We don't have to do it to get our social interaction. We don't have to do it to get our experiences and our adventures. But we choose to do it because it's fun and it's special and it's something that we don't do very much. I don't know. Maybe that's too optimistic. Maybe virtual reality will be our final invention. Maybe after virtual reality is perfected, a couple of centuries will pass and then aliens will visit Earth and they'll find just a bunch of mummies with Oculus Rift headsets on, sitting on their couches. I don't know. Is that too dark? Jack Coyer, has anyone you known ever surprised you by expressing they like a particular film you wouldn't expect them to, or even watch a film that you wouldn't expect them to? Both examples of this have happened fairly recently with my dad. Firstly, I've frequently heard this 50-year-old man exchanging quotes and insults from Mean Girls with my younger sisters. Secondly, and most memorably, whilst being a film fan, he's not the most appreciative of films that require him to do much thinking. One day he asked me if I would recommend a film he had thought about recording. He couldn't remember much of the description the TV guide gave him, but he could remember the title, Inland Empire. He failed to understand why I nearly fell over laughing until he started watching it. You know, it's funny, my example is my dad as well. My dad is a Navy veteran, and not like a gruff guy. Like he's a really cool, really nice guy, but he has a certain imposing demeanor to him sometimes, especially if you don't really know him. And he swears a lot, and he's just sort of he used to drink a lot. He doesn't drink as much anymore, but just sort of a stereotypical, rural kind of man's man type of guy. And his favorite movie in the world is The Wizard of Oz. And he loves The Wizard of Oz, and he will watch it whenever it's on. And that always sort of fucked with me as a kid, because I couldn't reconcile that. My big, tough, mean dad who loved The Wizard of Oz. But yeah, that would be my example. Because you wouldn't, if you met my dad and you hung out with him and you talked to him for a couple hours, had a beer with him or whatever, you would never think, I bet this dude's favorite movie is The Wizard of Oz. But it is. And he also likes It's a Wonderful Life. He goes in for sentimental fare, especially holiday-related sentimental fare. That was a surprise to me, and it's still kind of strange when I think about it. But yeah, that would be my example, my dad. Marion Jones, greetings from the UK, Steve. Great channel. I recently met up with an old friend I hadn't seen in years, only to find he's now a flat Earth conspiracy theorist who believes science and space exploration is all a lie. He's also into cryptozoology. I have a science background in chemistry, but take an interest in all science. I've tried many times now to change his opinion using evidence, calculus, geometry, but he insists he knows the truth and that I have been fooled by Freemasons or NASA or something. He refuses to try to view the ISS through my telescope when I offer, which is just one way I could think of to attempt to shatter the flat Earth NASA paranoia. I even showed some of your 5 Things videos on conspiracies. It just made him angry. My question is, have you ever had a friend who was a conspiracy theorist? Were you able to change any of their views even a bit? Do you maintain relationships with any of those people, or do you cut them off from your life completely? Thanks. Some years ago, an old friend was visiting, and he let it slip in conversation that he might sort of kind of be a 9/11 truther, and I kind of lost it. It was one of those conversations where he was like, I just think there are some questions in the official story that haven't been answered. And I'm on the other side going, are you fucking kidding me? I was just completely going over the top and losing it. But we're still friends. It hasn't become like a thing. And I remember when I was in college, I took a political science class where one of the classmates who I got relatively close to during the class was a big-time conspiracy theorist, like Alex Jones, loose change, Illuminati conspiracy guy, right? He was into all of it. Didn't believe he was a tax protester. He was a 9/11 truther, and he was like an anti-Illuminati guy. Like, he was into all of it, and he was a really nice guy, and a really smart guy. Like, he wasn't, the stereotypical, conspiracy theorist from the internet who you just think, oh god, this guy doesn't know his ass from his elbow. He was actually a really sharp guy. He just had these utterly bizarre, unsubstantiated beliefs about the way the world works and about conspiracies. And we haven't kept in touch after that class, but we were friends during the class, and after class we would talk sometimes and we would argue about these conspiracies because I just thought he was completely on Mars, But yeah, it didn't stop us from getting along. But that sort of thing, it can be a barrier, depending on the personalities involved. Because I have just no patience with that at all. So for me to get along with someone who is a conspiracy theorist and is really assertive about it, they have to be like a really nice, really charming, awesome person in every other aspect that I can see of them, because I have so little tolerance for conspiracy theorist or the conspiracy theorist mindset. I am more likely, in the absence of that additional charm or that additional thing to make them an attractive person, to just say, okay, well, have a nice life, and just cut them off. Life is too short, really. Strawberry eggs. Hey Steve, I don't know how much media you enjoy that is localized into English from another language, but I'm still curious about your opinion. How important is accuracy to you in a localized work? Do you want it to be as true to the original text as possible, or do you not mind liberties being taken? I'm a fan of Japanese video games, anime, and manga, so for me, there's also the matter that Japanese is harder to translate into English, especially without sounding awkward. If something is translated accurately, there may be a lot of nuance missed in a direct translation that a clever localizer can get across in a different way. So, yeah, thoughts? I don't really watch much anime these days, but I do enjoy samurai films. And whenever I watch a Japanese samurai film, I always try to get it in the subtitled version, not the dubbed version, so that I can read the subtitles but still hear the actual vocal performances of the actors. Like, that's really important to me. And I always keep in mind that what I am reading in the subtitles is a translation, is a in a sense a transformation of what the actors actually are saying on screen that I don't have access to because I don't speak Japanese. And the only way I can really experience the original true film in its intended form is to learn Japanese, which I just haven't. I just haven't learned it. I don't understand Japanese. But since I don't, the best I can do is to get those subtitles and to read that translation. But it's something that I always keep in mind, that what I'm experiencing is different than the original product, than the original film. And I think if you keep that in mind and you make sure that you are mindful of that separation, that you're enjoying the film as close as you can get to the original, but you're not actually enjoying the original because of the language barrier, I think it's easier to deal with those translation issues. I mean, personally, I don't mind a translator that takes some artistic liberties to get the point across. I usually I'm not even conscious of it because again I don't speak the native language. I can't discern whether a given translation is done a bit more freely, a bit more artfully, or is more literal and close to the text. I don't even know the difference as long as it feels good and feels natural and is entertaining or moving or whatever it's supposed to be to me as I'm watching it. That's all I really care about. And I feel like as long as you make that distinction between the original and the translation, you're in a good place with that. You're doing as much justice to the original work as the viewer as you possibly can. David Meyer. In hindsight, after having watched Dawn of Justice, has your opinion of Man of Steel become more negative? Additionally, you noted in your Man of Steel review that you thought Henry Cavill made for a good Superman. Has Superman Dawn of Justice soured your opinion on his portrayal? I should note that I gather from your reviews your problem with his portrayal has more to do with Zack Snyder's direction and the film's scripts of the character. I don't think Dawn of Justice has made my opinion of Man of Steel more negative. I think several years of thinking about Man of Steel has made my opinion of Man of Steel more negative. Having had a few years to stew about it is what has made my opinion of Man of Steel more negative. It has become more negative. I will say that in answer to your question, but it wasn't because of Dawn of Justice. I think if I made a Man of Steel review today, it would be way harsher than my review of Man of Steel was that I made right after I saw the movie. The more I have talked about it with people, the more I have had thoughts about it, the more I've ruminated on it, the worse my opinion of it has become. I don't know if it's a worse movie than Dawn of Justice or not. I think Dawn of Justice was better in the sense that I didn't feel like I was bait and switched. Like Man of Steel, I felt like based on the trailers, I was sold a very thoughtful, very poetic, very visually beautiful, insightful exploration of Superman. And instead what I got was a 2.5 hour cutscene from an incredibly violent video game. Whereas with Batman v Superman, that's all they were selling from the very beginning. They were selling it on carnage from the very beginning. So at least when I walked into the theater, I knew what I was getting into. So in that sense, I didn't have as negative a reaction to Batman v Superman as I did to Man of Steel. But I mean, Dawn of Justice is such a horrible movie. It's terribly, terribly written. The characters are awful. Their actions make no sense. The action scenes even are often pointless and don't even serve the plot. It's just a bad movie. So I think in terms of what I think of them as films, Man of Steel is probably better. Dawn of Justice is probably worse, but who can tell? As for Henry Cavill, I still think he would make a fine Superman with the right script and the right director, which he has had neither so far. But he has a good look. He can be a very charismatic, charming presence on screen, as you would know from other performances, not from Superman. And I think there's no reason why he couldn't be a terrific Superman in these movies. He just hasn't been written that way. He hasn't been given the chance to play that character. But yeah, I think he'd be a great Superman. But it ain't gonna happen. Hey, it's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Vitamin W. Do you think violence is ever a correct, appropriate response to non-violent offenses? I don't know about correct or appropriate, but I would say that violence at times in certain situations is an understandable response to a non-violent offense. I'll say that. McFly88, Steve, if you had to rest your head on a pillow and pay a doctor to tell you what you could figure out for yourself, who'd it be? Hannibal Lecter, Tony Soprano's shrink Jennifer Melfi, Dr. Leo Marvin? How about Dr. Fraser Crane, Dr. Katz, Dr. Scratch and Sniff from Animaniacs? I would say Paul from In Treatment, Gabriel Byrne's character from In Treatment. I think he's probably the best movie or TV show therapist that I've ever seen. But if you want me to pick a funny one, I don't know, maybe Dr. Hugo Strange. Linnaeus Ferculum. Hey Steve, formerly Cham826 here. Hi there. And I was wondering how you pick your topics for And Now the Good News. I usually start at a website called Science Daily that sort of aggregates a lot of positive science news, not just positive science news, depressing science news too. And I pick from that, and also sometimes people will share stories with me. And my one criteria is that it has to be something that is genuinely like good news that tells you that maybe the world isn't such a shitty place after all. I don't do just sort of generic feel-good stories like cat rescued from tree. I love those stories. I think it's always nice when someone rescues a cat from a tree, but the good news videos are meant to be a little more substantial than that, which is why I typically stick to like science and medicine and technology related news. But yeah, I start with a website called Science Daily, and then I kind of build out from there until I get interesting stories for the video. Christy Winters. Steve, have you ever traveled to Europe? And if so, where and what did you think? Follow up, where would you like to go next? If not, where would you like to visit and why? As you know, there is always a free tour guide waiting for you and a place to stay if both needed if the two of you ever make it to Cologne. Well, obviously, having received your gracious invitation, Christy, I would love to come to Germany. I would love to see Cologne. I've never been to Europe. I've never traveled to Europe, which is a shame. It's something that I know I am lacking. Like, I feel like I'm worse off for it because I would love to do it and I just haven't done it. I would love to travel to continental Europe. I'd love to visit Germany. I'd love to visit France. I'd love to see Paris. I'd love to go to the UK. Thanks to the internet, I have lots of friends in the UK now. I'd love to go to the UK and visit some of my friends that I've made in the UK. I'd love to go to Japan. I've never been to Japan. I also have friends who live in Japan now, which it would be cool to just stop in and say hi. So yeah, there are lots of places that I haven't been that I would love to go. You know, maybe I'll get to go someday. Maybe after Henry Cavill plays a charming, heroic Superman, I'll get to go to Europe and Asia. Rock and Rob 210. Steve, could you chew me out in Jack McPherson's voice? No, I can't, but I'll tell you who can. Is Jack McPherson, and he's right over here. Jack, hey, remember we talked about this? All right, I'm gonna cut to a closer shot so you can just get Jack, and then he can chew you out, okay? Hey, Rocket Rob, what kind of fucking name is that? As far as I'm concerned, you can fuck off and die, you fucker! Unless, of course, you happen to be a registered voter. Because as you may know, I am a candidate for president of these United States. If you're a registered voter in these United States, and your state has not yet voted in the primary process, please vote for Jack McPherson. Remember my campaign slogan. Vote for me, or I'll bloody kill you. Thank you, Jack. That was excellent. I hope that gave you whatever you needed. Rock and Rob 210. Chemistry student, Steve, lightning round question. Can I pet your beard? Follow up. Can you do a 5 things about cancer? I guess it would be okay if you pet my beard. You know, I know I'm gonna know a lot of people at the Reason Rally this time, and I really hope it doesn't just become like a beard stroking orgy, because that would not be cool for me. Please control yourselves. And yeah, I probably will do one about cancer at some point. I'm not sure when, but that's a pretty big subject that I'm sure I could get a video out of. Yes. Radical Bacon, can I pet the micro car? You know, I don't. Yes, just ask the owner. Make sure it's okay. Make sure it's okay, and then yes, you can stroke the micro car to your heart's content. I don't think the micro car will know the difference, but as long as it's cool with the owner, I say go nuts. Koji Kabuto, hi Steve, question. Do you think the moon is an artificial object made by someone who's watching you right now from his spaceship? No. According to a comic book story that I read recently, the moon is where Superman buried his cat. It's real. It's real. Fuzzball. Oh, God. Anyway, that's it for the questions. That's it for the lightning round. Time for the shout out. The shout out this week goes to the Social Justice Education Network, or SJEN, specifically the SJEN series of podcasts that they have posted. I usually give these shout outs to a YouTube channel, but I'm turning it around. I'm flipping the script. I'm doing something a little different this week. So the shout out goes to the Social Justice Education Network. And what really earned them the shout out was one of their most recent episodes. I think actually their most recent episode of their podcast featured as guests Angela Brown and a buddy of mine who took my picture in September at the atheist conference in Pennsylvania that I attended, Josiah Mannion, who is an awesome photographer who you might see if you attend atheist conferences. He is always there documenting the proceedings. He's an awesome photographer and just a really good dude. He is an atheist, and he is also someone who cares about social justice and is a really great guy. And he talked about, on this podcast with Angela Brown as his other guest, they talked about morality and can you be good without God? And it was a really interesting discussion. And I would recommend you listen to that episode, and I would recommend you go back and listen to the other episodes as well, because they're not all atheist related, but it's all about social justice and humanism and progress and equality. And it's just the kind of thing that just I really enjoy and really find educational and useful. And if you feel the same way, check out the Social Justice Education Network, the SJEN podcast in particular. I really, really enjoy them, and I hope that you will enjoy them as well. Check them out. Speaking of podcasts, that's a segue. Check out the Let Me Listen podcast. These are a trio of podcasts, all produced by my very good friend, the great Jason Harding, a.k.a. Jason with a D, the puppet master of Opinionville here on YouTube. He produces 3 excellent shows. There's Let Me Finish, which he co-hosts with Finite Atticus. There is American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, a hilarious improv comedy podcast. And there is Late Seating, the movie review podcast that Jason co-hosts with me, where we talk about classic films. We give them a fresh review. We summarize the plot and make fun of it, whether we like the movie or not. And then we decide whether we think this movie deserves the reputation it has, whether it's an infamously bad movie or a classic revered movie. We give our opinion whether we think it deserves to be thought of as a classic or deserves to be thought of as a historic bomb. So it's a really fun show. It's one of my favorite things that I do. You can listen to all the episodes of Late Seating and all the episodes of all the other Let Me Listen podcasts by going to letmelistenpodcasts.com, and I really wish that you would. Thanks all of you guys for listening to those podcasts. It really, really makes me feel good, because I really like my contribution to the Let Me Listen podcast, and I hope that you do too if you give it a listen. So that's it for me, everybody. I'm out of here. Please leave a comment on this video to ask me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, take care, everybody.
Hey, listen up, it's not done yet. If you like this video, then please like it and share it and subscribe to this bloody channel already. And also consider helping out Steve with making more videos of this type by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives and becoming a patron. Would you do that for me? Thank you very much. Now fuck off!